The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. We're very pleased to have two representatives from Southside, Virginia, Delegate Danny Marshall.
Good morning. Thank you for so much for doing this. This is a public service. People always, when I go home, talk about this. They're always glad to see you, and also Senator Stanley and myself. Give a few pointers on what we're doing here in Richmond for them.
Great, good to have you. Senator Bill Stanley, good to see you, sir.
Great to see you, Woody. I hear you're going on vacation soon just to get away from us, so
I am.
You're going to need it, I'm
and
sure.
And for that reason,
yes,
absolutely.
And we're sorry, but maybe we should help pay for part of it.
Yes. I would welcome that.
I'm sure you would.
Absolutely.
That'd be a gift if we couldn't do that.
Oh, yeah, I can't give you a gift. That's right.
That's too bad. Local Government Committee that you chair, tell us about its jurisdiction, operation, and subject matter.
Well, I was honored by being elected by the senators to chair local government this year and for the next 4 years. We really focus on what the needs of our local government, the localities are in terms of laws, ordinances, charters, those kind of things, and some of the issues that come up that affect localities at that level more than they affect us at a state level. So what we try to do is make sure that every locality has a seat at the table. Every locality can tell us what they need, and that legislation which is proposed by senators and House of Delegate members that pertain to local government are given a full and fair hearing. And if it's a good bill, we send it out. If it's not a good bill, we try to kill it right there. And
Delegate Marshall, you are the new chair of the Agriculture, Chesapeake and Natural Resources Committee. Congratulations, sir.
Well, thank you. I was very humbled to the Speaker appointed me to this. I knew this was going to happen last year, and so again, it's agriculture, and like in my part of the state, agriculture is the #1 industry in Pittsylvania County, and so that is chaired by a farmer from over in Chesapeake, Delegate Barry Knight. Again, deals mostly with any animal bills or any type of agriculture. And Chesapeake is chaired by Tony Wilt up in Harrisonburg. Anything that relates to the Chesapeake Bay cleanup or Chesapeake Bay as far as fish, anything of that nature. And then Natural Resources is chaired by South Boston's James Edmonds, and deals with anything that DEQ or any type of hunting permits or any of those type things.
Great. And talk to us about the local economy and the district you represent and the kinds of things that you see as being necessary to improve the economy.
Well, I think Delegate Marshall and I would agree that, we oftentimes up here in Richmond have to remind Northern Virginia delegations and Hampton Roads delegations that we actually built Virginia down in Southside and Southwest Virginia with textiles, tobacco, manufacturing, and coal. Those were the economic drivers so long ago, and just up to recently as 20 years. And so during that time, of course, we had the highest per capita income, the lowest unemployment rates. The #1 industry in Northern Virginia in 1978, when my dad was deployed there and we moved there, was dairy. But down where my family was, we were the ones that built Virginia. Now the economy has changed. With NAFTA and CAFTA, we were told by the federal government that it would be good for our area, but instead all of our jobs went away. And so we suffered greatly from that. Now what we see is that tobacco farmers were told not to grow tobacco, that tobacco was bad, that they're being paid by the federal government not to grow tobacco. And now we're hearing from our federal government that coal is bad. So, step by step, the federal government has done wonders to harm our economy. And what we've got to do is build our area back, and we've been doing that by creating a new foundation. Delegate Marshall, I call him the jobs delegate. He really knows how to create jobs. I've always said that the private sector doesn't create jobs, or the public sector doesn't create jobs. The private sector does. But Danny comes pretty close to creating jobs, and how aggressive he is in bringing our economy back. So that new foundation that we're really building in Southside Virginia starts with workforce training, education, making sure that our children have the best opportunity to succeed, bringing down that wall that seems to be in front of us that prevents us from seeing the American dream, and giving everybody an opportunity to be what they want to be and be who they want to be, and ultimately bringing companies into our area by repairing our infrastructure and educating that workforce, because then our children won't have to leave after we educate them, because right now, we struggle to make sure that we have the jobs for them in our area.
Talk to us, Delegate Marshall, about the importance of the Tobacco Commission that you serve on.
Well, Senator Stanley and I both serve on that, and we're fortunate to have the Tobacco Commission. We talked before we got on air that there is a bill right now, that a Senate bill from Senator John Edwards, that would strip the money out of the Tobacco Commission and put it into a Medicaid expansion. It seems like every couple of years we'll get a bill like that that will take the money away from us, and it would be devastating to our part of the state. Thankfully that we do have that money, and what we're trying to do with that money is to try to go build the infrastructure so that when those companies come to us, that we are ready for that. And some of the things that we're doing are, as far as like Berry Hill Industrial Site in Pittsylvania County, Commonwealth Crossing site over in Henry County, and we have invested money there. And the reason we did that is because Volkswagen came through our part of the state several years ago, and we did not have a graded site ready for them. So they went to Tennessee. So we learned our lesson there, that we have to have that site. The site has to be not just the land, but the site needs to be graded. It has to have water, it has to have sewer, it has to have the infrastructure, cable, as far as internet connection there, so that when that company is ready to start, it can start. And so in session, while we're here, we cannot pass a bill to create economic development. We can certainly, cast a shadow over economic development. What we have to do while we're in General Assembly session is try to create that environment to grow jobs. And then when we are outside of session, then we work on the Tobacco Commission to help use those resources that were entrusted upon us to try to revitalize the state. And I tell my friends from all over the Commonwealth, it's to their best interest in Northern Virginia or in Tidewater. If Southside grows, then it helps the whole state.
And you mentioned education, and I believe the Tobacco Commission funds scholarships and low-cost loans for students, does it not?
Absolutely, it does, for students that are seeking to after they graduate from high school, go on to a secondary education. It funds scholarships for a lot of our students who are children of tobacco growers, but also has a great program so that anybody can get a scholarship and attend the university of their choice. Without that, because our per capita income right now, which used to be the highest in Virginia, is now at $28,000 for a family of four.
$28,000.
$28,000, and the state average is $63,000, and Northern Virginia's is $98,000. So you see what a challenge it can be for a family to put their child through college. Well, the Tobacco Commission provides that extra incentive and that ability for that family of four to pay for the education of their child. So it's a great program. It's very successful. We have a high graduation rate and a high success rate. And what we're really seeing is that those students that take advantage of those scholarships go on and be great Americans, great Virginians, and great citizens of this great Commonwealth.
Now, a project that you've worked on since you've been here, and which has been in the planning for quite a while, is Interstate 73. Mm-hmm. Where do we stand on that? Give us a little history of that project.
I-73 has been a concept for quite some time. The federal government said that it was a high priority project. Other states like South Carolina and North Carolina have built sections of I-73, but kind of stopped that construction because Virginia had not, until this time, shown a lot of incentive and desire to build that. What we've done is make sure that I-73 is put back on the front burner, and to make sure that everybody here in the House of Delegates and the Senate are aware of the need for I-73. I-73 would start at the North Carolina border, cut through Martinsville, Henry County, Franklin County, onto the Roanoke Valley, and then into West Virginia. When we build that section of highway, it will bring to our area 53,000 permanent jobs.
53,000.
Yeah, I mean, wow. If you want a jobs program, that's a jobs program. Mm-hmm. So what we're trying to do is make sure that since we have the corridor, which has been approved by the federal government, now we need to bring it down to where the road's actually going to be. And so the preliminary engineering has to be next. We're trying to get VDOT to do that. We're also looking at funding sources, both at federal funding sources and at the state level. I've got bills in that will provide that funding. And additionally, that we're working in partnerships on two levels, which we have not done before. I put in a bill which is now a law, which establishes a federal interstate compact, which allows North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, Ohio, and even Michigan to work together to finish I-73, which will carry goods and services from 3 deep water ports into the interior of the United States through Virginia.
3 deep water ports.
That's right, Wilmington, North Carolina, Charleston, and Savannah. And so we need that. And on top of that, we have a regional cooperative effort, which we haven't had before, between Martinsville, Henry County, Franklin County, and the Roanoke Valley, to where together we can lobby and strategize how we're going to build that. I also serve as the chairman of the I-73 Study Commission, which is now in its final year, where we're determining not just why we want this and why it's needed, but how we build it and how we're going to pay for it. And then the results of how this will pay for itself in 10 years after we finish it.
Great. Delegate Marshall, I think this regional approach is part of this new program called Go Virginia.
Yeah, I had the people in my office yesterday about Go Virginia, and Go Virginia is, to me, is a great idea. That it's about workforce development. It's about trying to recreate the economy, and I think it will help Southern Virginia. It'll help all of rural Virginia. As far as land, we're working on land, but the main thing that we have to work on is people. We have to differentiate ourselves. Everybody's got land, so you got to have that. But the main thing is we got to have a trained and ready and willing workforce, and they got to be trained with the skills of today and tomorrow. The jobs of the past and the skills of the past in most jobs of the future do not work with advanced manufacturing, and we have brought in some advanced manufacturing, and so we are looking to bring in more. The Dubai Commission, we fund an economic developer who lives in England, and he has brought, I know that he's brought 4 companies to Danville, Pittsylvania County and Henry County to look. And so we are working real hard to bring those jobs to us from all over the world.
Didn't former Delegate Joe May invest in a business in Danville?
He did. It was one of my first years here. Robert Hurt and I sat next to each other, and we had a break in session, so started talking to Joe, and always trying to knock on doors to see who's ready to move. I said, Joe, are you thinking about expanding your business? Well, yes, I am. How about making a trip to Danville? So we did, and the story is now he has a facility he has one in Northern Virginia, and he has one in Danville. He has about 65 employees, the last I heard, and some of his employees from Northern Virginia moved to Danville. Mm-hmm. And I asked Joe, I said, what was the things that they liked most about? And it's things that we take for granted, but they don't take for granted. Is first of all that the people that came from Northern Virginia could afford a house within a 5-minute commute of business. In Northern Virginia, this guy was driving over an hour to get to his job. The other thing he liked about that, something I would have never thought about, is that he can go home for lunch, and that was a big deal to him. So it's we take for granted. People in other areas, especially in Northern Virginia, where you have this high traffic, is the quality of life is important. We take somewhat advantage, of that quality of life, but in Northern Virginia, it's completely different than what we have to deal with.
And of course, new technologies bring new challenges. Especially the internet, and I believe one of the matters before your committee is discussion of Airbnb. Talk to us about what that means.
Well, Airbnb, it's kind of like Uber. Last year, Uber, where individuals could turn their car into a taxi, and using an internet app that is on their phone, they could acquire clients through Uber or Lyft. And certainly, so we had to concern ourselves with regulating, because our number one concern was the passenger, who is a Virginian, and certainly that was our challenge last year. This year we've got Airbnb, Air Bed and Breakfast, which using an app, you can find a place to stay, theoretically, anywhere, and people can rent out their homes as if they are hotels or bed and breakfasts. The challenge is that people buy their homes in a residency and in a neighborhood, and have an expectation of privacy and have an expectation that it is just that, a neighborhood, not a commercial district. One of the challenges we face is that, one, it certainly is a challenge to our hotel industry, but two, it's unregulated. So you may have total strangers coming into your neighborhood on an overnight or a transient occupancy stay of 3, 4, 5 days or 2 weeks. You don't know who they are. Certainly it's not their property, so they may not take care of it in a way that they would their own property. And it presents, quite frankly, an intrusion of commercial enterprise into a private residence. This seems to be a trend. Certainly if we're going to allow it, it needs to be regulated, but we have to be, number one, I think, especially at the local government level, we have to be cognizant that we have zoning. And we do zoning and overlay districts for a purpose. And that purpose is to make sure that we're maintaining value for people's homes, that we're maintaining the peace and tranquility that people expect when they buy a house in a certain neighborhood, and certainly that there's a level playing field. Because if these things happen, how do we collect the taxes? Most localities have a tax that's paid for overnight stays in hotels. Well, how do we track that if that's going to happen? How do we know that the person that's renting out their house is going to pay a tax which is levied against any operation such as a hotel where people stay overnight? I mean, that's part of the local revenue. So we have a real challenge, and in fact, that's coming up in local governments today. I'm interested to see how this works out.
What about certificate of public need requirements? I know there's some bills, and I believe you have one dealing with that issue as well.
I do. I think what we're seeing is a groundswell of belief that we need to change the COPN, Certificate of Public Need, which has permitting basically so that hospitals can get some of the high-tech equipment, and that we make sure that they're evenly distributed throughout the areas, especially in our rural areas. Rural health care is something that I care very deeply about. But it's also a revenue generator for our hospitals, and especially where our hospitals are losing revenue or income, or in rural areas where the rate of service may be high, but the rate of compensation to the hospital may be low. Sometimes the hospitals call those slow pays or no pays. Then these kind of make up the difference. And what we're seeing in the General Assembly are bills to eliminate COPN altogether, that free market enterprise will reign and that will bring down costs of care. I've taken a more measured approach that we create a commission to study it, to speed up the application process, to streamline it so we're not bogged down in bureaucratic red tape, but rather cutting through it, but not getting rid of COPN. I mean, I think the Certificate of Public Need is something we have to have. It's the way we do business. It's not broken. It doesn't need fixing. And what I worry about is that if we were to take COPN away, then what we're going to have is you can get a spray tan and a CT scan in the same place. But who reads that CT scan? The same 19-year-old that gave you the spray tan? These are concerns that I have.
Let me just add something. People, come to me and talk about COPN, that they are free market, and I'm as much for free market as anybody. But the problem is hospitals are not free market. What burger stand in City of Danville and Pittsylvania County would say that somebody shows up at your business and doesn't have any money, you've got to feed them. Well, it's the same thing. If they show up at the hospital and they don't have any money, the hospital has to take care of them. I mean, I don't know of any other business model that I know of. I know certainly in my former business that somebody called up and said, I don't have any money, will you sell me concrete? Well, get the money and then call me back. But it didn't work that way. So the problem is, and especially you take, like Senator Stanley talked about before, when you have that income level so low, you have people that do not have health insurance or have barely do have health insurance. The problem is it's not a free market for the hospitals.
Talk to us a little bit more about your intermodal transfer facility legislation.
Well, thank you for asking that. If you go to Northern Virginia in Front Royal, they have what is called an inland port. And what this means is that they have about 100 acres of land there. It's been there for almost 20 years. And so containers, 20-foot or either 40-foot containers, citizens see them on the back of tractor trailers, they will bring those to that port in Front Royal and store them there. And then 2 trains a day pick those containers up, take them to Norfolk, and then in Norfolk they will, any products that is being shipped in, will pick those up and then carry them to Front Royal. And so what I've been told in Front Royal, since that business has been there, they have been popped up. There's distribution centers around this facility. There have been other businesses located, trucking companies, etc. So what my bill does is that it directs the Virginia Department of Transportation to study to see where in Southside Virginia, and if a inland port makes sense for us. Now, what you have to look at is certainly they got to be near a railroad. And so if you look at Danville, we got the main north-south, Norfolk and Southern Railroad that runs right through Danville. You got 29, you got 58, so I think that we would be in a good location. And the reason I think this makes sense is because if we do this, it will be able to help our manufacturers ship products to Europe, get products back in. I talked to the Secretary of Transportation. He's excited about this. He says anything that can get freight to the ports less expensive, but also gets truck traffic off the roads is a good thing.
And what about this AFID fund that is a fund to help farmers, I believe, and industrial development?
Well, it's a bill we passed a couple of years ago that, again, you know, agriculture is the #1 industry. Forestry is #2 in Pittsylvania County. So it's a big issue for us. It helps farmers to create new crops. You know, we're always looking for new ways to try to help those farmers. You know, in Pittsylvania County, they were looking at poultry, to expand the poultry like they have up in the Shenandoah Valley. They are also looking to for wine production in the state of Virginia. There's not enough grapes grown in Virginia for all the wine. And if you want to be classified a Virginia wine, the grapes have to be grown here. So again, that type of fund would help increase grape production in Pittsylvania County and throughout rural Virginia. So, you know, again, we're trying to help those farmers be profitable and stay on the family farm.
And that was my bill, the AFID bill, and we did it in a small business group with Governor McDonald. It's like a governor's opportunity fund for farmers. But what it also does is create partnerships with the localities, the local governments, and the farm industries to create processing plants to where if it's grown here, what we're doing a lot of times is sending it out to be processed. So now what AFID does, the Agricultural, Forestry, Industrial Development Fund, is create that partnership with local government and that farmer and create jobs by processing it in Virginia. That's a great idea. That's a game changer, and that creates jobs. And just as Danny said, anything we can do to help the farmer, where agriculture is so important where we're from, is what we need to do.
Another potential game changer that I believe you have a pilot program on relates to telemedicine. Talk to us about that.
Well, as I told you, Woody, I'm very interested in rural health care and the reform of rural health care so we can increase the outcomes and lower the cost and then make it more affordable for everybody to be invested in their own care. And so we have some challenges in Southern Virginia. One of the challenges is primary care physicians, access to doctors, access to specialists. Because the average age of a primary care physician in, let's say, Danville and all the way to the coal fields is 56 years old. For every 2 doctors that we lose to retirement or relocation, we don't even get 1 to replace them. So there are challenges there. The other one is that most people live many miles away from the nearest hospital or their doctor, 60, 70 miles. So they may not go there for regular checkups. And then when they're starting to feel sick, may have an acute condition, they wait until the very last minute, they present at the hospital, and what happens is it's the highest level of care and perhaps, as we were talking about earlier, the lowest level of compensation to the hospital. So what telemedicine would do is actually bring the doctor into the patient's home, in a patient-centered medical home where it's a collaborative effort with the patient's primary care physician and other specialists, nutritionists. And so what telemedicine would actually do is make sure that they're getting the same quality care, that patient, in, let's say, the coal fields, as perhaps someone who's in Northern Virginia or downtown Richmond. Because we don't have the specialists, because our rate of pay for doctors coming out of medical school is lower. And most of these doctors that are coming out of our medical schools, their average debt is $166,000. So that makes it a real challenge for us to attract and retain those doctors that will treat our people. This will enable us to bring the doctor into the home and treat them better and manage their care.
Great.
And just to expand on that, the reason we're able to do this is because of the work of the Tobacco Commission to put in the broadband throughout rural, our part of the state. And we created this thing called Mid-Atlantic Broadband that's based in South Boston, but the broadband goes throughout all of the area. And it doesn't go to the last mile. It doesn't come to your house. It would come to the City of Danville, or other providers would bring it to your home. But we just did something recently this past year as a pilot project with Microsoft, who's located in Mecklenburg County. So they are putting up towers. Going to put up about 30 towers throughout rural parts of Campbell County, Halifax County, and Mecklenburg County. And these towers will be just above the tree line. And so they would be able to broadcast broadband within about a 25-mile radius. So if you don't have get access, if the cable doesn't come to your house, then you'll be able to get it wireless. And so that it does a number of things. First of all, it certainly does the issue as far as health care, but it also would be able to, the people can sit in their home and connect to the internet, but also they could do their jobs there also. So it brings another piece of economic development to South Virginia.
What about some incentive to diminish the rate of attrition that you're experiencing in terms of doctors aging out, if you will?
Well, one bill that I put in last year that I think will help is creating scholarship programs that will pay off the debts for doctors. Because, as I said, if they're coming out with $166,000 in debt, that's why they go to Northern Virginia, because they're making so much more money. And those hospitals, for-profit hospitals, are paying off a great deal of their debt. That bill now allows the Virginia that says any doctor that commits to a rural, underserved, or underprivileged area and practices medicine will pay off their bills and their tuition and their debt if they promise to serve at least 5 years down there. That's one way to do it. Another way is a bill that I have now, which now has rotations for our med students to do at least one rotation in a rural, underserved, or underprivileged area. So those hospitals can talk to these doctors, try to recruit them, and also the doctors can see what a beautiful area we have and why it's the best place to live, work, play, and raise a family.
And talk to us a little bit about the importance of veterans. Virginia values veterans, and that's an attempt to marry them up with private employers so that they can get gainful employment.
We have 10% of the population of Virginia, is close to 800,000 Virginia residents are veterans. I serve outside of session on the Virginia Workforce Council, and I serve on the Veterans Subcommittee. And one of the things that we're looking at is trying to help veterans who got skills in the service to be able to relate those so they can get college credits. The problem we're having right now is that if you take, let's just take welding, the welding in the Navy is different than welding in the Army, which is different than the Air Force. And so we're trying to figure out how to be able to get those and bring those to college credits.
Thank you. Good to see you both, Delegate Danny Marshall, Senator Bill Stanley.
Have a great vacation.
Thank you. Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans.